Hi.
Hi, Ella. Oh, I'm
Hello.
so stoked to be doing this with you
Me
tonight.
too. You're a real
Yay.
person. I only know
You're a
you
real
from
person.
Twitter.
I know this is our first time actually speaking to each other live, so I'm so excited that we're getting to do this.
This is so fun. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
so funny. Like I feel like I know you so well, but it's so parasocial because I read your book.
Yes, there is that, but there is also, I think, the and I don't know how you feel about this, having
Mhm.
been online for so many years, but I really do put a lot of stock in folks who have been talking to each other online for a really long time. I don't know, it might be my years in fandom, but I think
No,
I I
I
I,
absolutely.
I do put yeah, I think I do treat online relationships like a little, I mean, the parasocial thing is so
Mhm.
real, but reciprocal mutual online
Yeah.
relationships, I don't know, I don't treat I think speaking in person as necessarily a hallmark of a relationship. I don't know, that
Mhm.
might sound weird, but yeah.
I mean, you helped me find an accountant, so I'm already like,
I
she's
did,
great.
yes.
I trust her.
Yes, I mean, truly, that's just we have, writers have to watch out for each other and be we have people, and yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the extended network of like, we all write about difficult stuff and you're my coworker. I feel
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. No,
so yeah.
I feel like Twitter every day is kind of like rolling into homeroom, and it's kind of
Yes.
we all just kind of show up, and then everyone just kind of waves hello and then maybe goes out to write for a little bit, but
Mhm.
we're all just kind of, that's like our office space sort
That's
of.
a really good metaphor for it, actually.
Yeah.
Like, we all log in, we say hello. I just went back and visited my middle school English teacher and like hung out
Oh,
for advisor base, which is like end of the day homeroom,
oh
essentially.
my
And
God.
it's very much like there's the 13-year-old who's like poking a cute girl with a pen because that's how he knows how to flirt at 13. Like, it's very much the same dynamic as Twitter.
Yeah. Yeah. Just poking each other less articulately, perhaps. So
Yes, yes.
I love
Exchanging
it.
memes
Yes.
instead. Yes.
Yeah.
But hello. We are
Hello.
here to talk about your amazing memoir, which I'm obsessed with, which comes out
Thank
on
you.
October 25th. So everyone
Yep.
should pre-order if they have not already. I texted you this before that I'm so tempted to just gush at you about how much I loved your book.
Yeah.
But I don't know how useful that would be for everyone tuning in.
I mean, I appreciate it, and it means a lot that it's already, that folks are already connecting with it. So I just really appreciate that you've already read it and loved it, and that we're doing this. I'm just stoked to talk writer to writer
Yeah,
about everything. Yeah.
absolutely. I have like some questions, but I was joking with a friend that like I feel like there are just passages I really love that I want to be like, can you tell me more of your thoughts? So
Yeah, of course.
this is not going to be a very formal interview, mostly because I fell in love with your book so much.
Mm,
But something that I found really interesting. So before we get started, we should talk about what your book is because
yeah.
we are having conversation very ahead of the people who are tuning in.
Yeah.
But the blurb that I really liked from your book was just a memoir of leaving the evangelical church and the search for radical new ways to build community. And the
Hmm.
way that I've been like recommending it to my friends is it's about realizing you're queer and leaving your husband and the church and being like,
Hmm.
what the hell is my worldview now?
Right.
Um, but
Right.
yes, yeah.
Yeah, no, it definitely, it's a memoir that braids a lot of cultural criticism with,
Mhm.
and the history of the church and how embedded that is with American history,
Yeah.
throughout my own personal story, which is just the TLDR for folks listening, is that yeah, I grew up in the rural Midwest, working class, grew up super faithful, very much a true believer, and then proceeded to, yeah, grow up in that, go to college, married my college sweetheart, was a virgin on my wedding night, I think is the shorthand for how, invested I was, and also he was. But then moved to Boston for grad school and pretty quickly, realized I was gay, and also, was doing a lot of self-reflection, just as I was getting older and being around different kinds of people, that really had me questioning a lot of structures that my marriage was built on and relied on, because it was incredibly conservative and a lot of other things. And then coming out just really blew my whole worldview apart and my whole sense of identity. And I think anyone who's had that kind of experience in life of whether it was coming out or something different, that just resulted in a total like life shift, identity shift. You have a before and an after. And I think there are so many different versions of that that can happen for folks. Like that's really the kind of narrative arc of the book. So
Very
yeah,
light, very light
very,
book.
very chill, very chill.
Yeah.
Some friends who've read it keep telling me, they're like, it's really fucking sad. And I'm like, oh, I guess it is. You know, when it's your life, as like as I imagine, you know, from your own writing that you do, it's like, oh, I guess it is. Like, but
Well, it's
you're
like
not.
it's a heavy book. It's very
Mm-hmm.
serious, but what I love about it and what it left me with was this profound sense of hope as well. Of yes,
Mm-hmm.
these things are sad, and you went through some really dark periods and some horrible situations, but you found who you are. There's a line in the
Yeah.
book that I don't have it in front of me, but you talked about like once you see who you are, you can't really walk away from that.
Mm-hmm.
And like it's such a powerful story of self-discovery. Um, Even
Yeah.
though it's also the heartbreak of realizing everything you thought you knew about who you were and how you're supposed to live your life is not what you expected. Like
Yeah.
it's sad, but it's hopeful. And I think that's really
Mm-hmm.
important. But it's so funny. I love the book. And there's so many, I think there's so many threads that different people will relate to.
Mm-hmm.
What I found really interesting is I grew up in a polar opposite situation because my parents were both
Right.
atheists. And so I
Yeah.
have like none of the same religious framework. And through reading your book, realized just how much Christianity has been baked into not only in the institutions that I interact with, but
Right.
the way that we think about family, the way that we think about relationships and gender. Like, even though I thought of myself as being this, like, I haven't been touched by religion and I grew up in this blah, blah, blah bubble, like,
Yeah.
no, I grew up in Connecticut where you still can't buy alcohol on Sundays. Like,
Blue laws. Blue
there's
laws,
still a
like,
thing.
yeah, like, did you grow up in Connecticut or in Massachusetts or in
Mm-hmm.
Minnesota or like in any of these states where blue laws are absolutely still in effect? That's incredibly, like, that's Christianity at work. Like,
Exactly. And so
yeah.
much of the way that we think about marriage is
Mm-hmm.
deeply Christian in this country, even though we don't
Yeah.
really, even though we think of marriage as becoming much more secular, it's really not. It's still a religious institution in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And something that I really benefited from was the way that you talked about I wrote it down so that I don't mess it up. I'm learning all these new
Mm.
phrases that
No,
the
all good.
atheist is learning. But like the idea of male headship
Mm-hmm.
and biblical womanhood, could
Yeah.
you explain a bit of what those terms mean for folks who might be a little newer?
Yeah, absolutely. Also, hi Yvette. Like we love you. Yeah, so male headship and biblical womanhood are very distinctly like evangelical centric, you know, kind of they've been marketed and exported to other parts of Christianity. So if folks grew up like super traditionally Catholic, for example, you may have also heard of these or had them, you know, like taught in a Bible study or something like that. But generally speaking, these are not phrases bandied about in pop culture or
Mm-hmm.
at the New York Times or that kind of thing. But male headship is, I mean, it's what it sounds like. It's straight up patriarchy. It's the man is the head of the household. He makes all the decisions. You know, it in an ideal situation in very like white churches, it's very much the man should be working, and also in churches that trend more upper class, it's like the man should be working and the woman shouldn't. Obviously, that theology adjusts like pending the congregation and like churches that I attended that were more in line with working class values, like my family, were not necessarily as penalizing of women who, for economic necessity, like had to work outside the home. But it's understood that the ideal aspirational, like white model, like white American, like nuclear family model that you're going for, quote unquote, in American Christianity is this like beaver cleaver situation of the man like being in charge of everything. But male headship, it's not just around like I think patriarchy as we might think about it in a women's and gender studies class or whatnot, or a gender and sexuality class now, as I'm dating myself there by calling it that. It's really that like that every decision about the family and every decision about every then like woman and person who they are quote unquote responsible for like falls to them, that like the wife's body like is considered like her husband's property, like, and these are women and men today who in this country who have who are baked into this ideology that the children's bodies are like the property of the responsibility of the husband. And so then the like coupled idea with this, right, is biblical womanhood, which is just like straight up submission all around. Submission in marriage, like submission to your father, submission if you're not married, like submission to your father, submission to the pastor, who is of course a man, like just this idea that your body does not belong to you, yourself does not belong to you, that submission is really the like godliest and most faithful form of worship and of spirituality that is possible for a woman to attain in the church. And these are the foundational, it's baked into everything. Even without calling it those things, those ideologies are baked into all parts of evangelicalism. It's incredibly insidious the way that children are trained in this from a very, very early age.
Yeah, it's very nerve-wracking. It's very not chill.
Yeah,
And
very much
it's so normalized as well. Like I think that it was so jarring for me to read about, because those are concepts that I know of. I know that's part of Christianity, depending on what type of Christianity you practice. But whenever you come across a term like that, and like the examples that you used, you talked about male headship in the context of when your father converted and was kind of born again. Your mom had been like the spiritual center of the family because your father wasn't all that religious. But as soon as your dad had that moment, he became like the new head of household for all of your family's religious, spiritual upbringing and decision making. And it's just like, it's so, you talked about being a little kid and being like, that doesn't make sense.
I mean, thinking about it in terms of, you know, like expertise or skill building, it's like, you know, if one of your parents is like a woodworker and has been doing it for many decades and is in charge of their business, and then suddenly the other parent was like, oh, I'm going to start doing that. And then on day one, the parent who'd been doing it for decades just decided to hand over everything to the person who had like just begun. Like that's maniacal.
It's wild.
That's absolutely bananas, like that you would do that. But that's how Christianity treats spiritual maturity with women versus men. It's like that just by virtue of your gender, you can't possibly possess power, possess authority over yourself, let alone over anyone else. And it's particularly the way that women are like trained, conditioned, and then explicitly told that we can't have that say over ourselves and our own bodies. Like I have so many friends out here, like I live in New York now, I was in Boston before, and I have so many friends who are like, how do, you know, evangelical women like not want to defend their own bodily autonomy and their own reproductive rights? That's how. Like that's been the messaging since, and not to let people off the hook here, but like that's been the messaging, you know, for those who grew up in the church, like since they were children. Like of course they don't like vote that way, of course they don't think that way, because they don't like fundamentally believe that they have it.
Even before abortion becomes the question, your body is not your own. Your body is under your father or your husband's control. So of course.
And ultimately under Jesus. It's like Jesus/God, then the men, then, you know, like it's not yours. And the idea like that I play with in the book, like that phrase, your body is not your own. That's something that like is a quote from the Bible, like your body is not your own. It was bought at a price. Like, and that's something that's told to believers, and that that our bodies like were bought at a price, like the price being the blood of Jesus. Like Jesus, you know, like paid the price for you. He died for you. Ergo, like since he died for you, you can't do jack shit. Like, you know, it's a very insidious kind of control.
Absolutely.
And it pervades everything. And so but what you were saying too about like thinking that you had grown up like kind of removed from all of it, and I think that was one of my main goals like with the book, was to really like was to make the connections that like you don't have to have ever left an evangelical church, like let alone like attended one, to have the influence of the church like pressing on your life. Like
absolutely,
Christian phrases are like, it's on the money we carry, it's in the bills that are passed into law, it's in the kind of like sex ed quote that's barely sex ed that gets taught in schools, which I imagine you have plenty of thoughts about. Like, so
But I think I even posted on my Instagram story about the Pledge of Allegiance and how I didn't
Yeah.
realize that One Nation Under God was such a recent addition to the
Hmm.
pledge, like stuff like that. Really, yeah, you definitely succeeded in demonstrating the way that even if you weren't raised within this faith or anywhere near it, it has still shaped your world in so many ways.
Yeah.
And I feel like the common thread between a lot of our work is power within relationships and like abuse and
Hmm.
gender and like I can't talk too much shit about my past relationships, but like I dated someone who was quite Christian and I didn't understand a lot of where just like some weird they were almost like cultural differences between us.
Mm.
And reading your book was like, oh, I get it now. Like this
Hmm.
weird conversation we had about whether or not we would have to raise our kids Christian, like he had that concept of male headship
Oh,
and the idea of like, well, this is up to me. Like
right.
and
Right.
yeah, and um I remember this is me being really shady, but like when we broke up, we were talking, we kind of argued about how he saw marriage as like the merging of two people. And I was like, that sounds terrible. Like I don't want to do that. I want to be an individual who's like in a partnership as opposed to a
Right.
merging. And then when you like it made sense when I read your book because
Right.
that's such a different approach that is so normalized within the evangelical faith. But yeah, I
Yeah.
have like exclamation points all over the book. But oh my God,
Yeah.
yeah, I wrote down a quote from your book about like the church teaches that two individuals become one, that marriage is the death of individuals. And
Hmm.
underneath that is the fact that, yeah, but the guy is still an individual.
Yeah.
It's really the woman who disappears and the
Yeah.
idea of the invisible wife. So that was me unleashing a lot of raw emotion.
Mm.
But I would love to hear
That's
like how you think about that and like how also these norms of male headship, biblical womanhood really do create an environment for
mm,
abuse and
yeah.
things to go haywire.
Yeah, no, I so appreciate you sharing that though. And
Mm-hmm.
when you DM'd me about that initially, I was like so struck and so moved that it like resonated in that way and so struck because I hadn't of all of the ways I had considered like readers who didn't have religious
Mm-hmm.
backgrounds like connecting with the book, that was not one of them. And that
Surprise.
just no, but it like totally made sense and it blew
Mm-hmm.
my mind. I was like, of course, people who have like been in situations that, you know, like entailed abuse like at the hands of folks who had evangelical mindsets, like this makes so much sense. And
Mm-hmm.
I was so yeah, like moved by that. And yeah, I mean the thing is that like it absolutely pains, I think, as abuse to people who are, I think it
Mm-hmm.
both is abusive within the system, but it is also abuse, like it pains as abuse to people outside of the system.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a scene in the book where I like notably where I'm screened by my PCP, who I'm going to for migraine treatment for domestic abuse with my ex-husband, who I like make a million disclaimers in the book, like that he never, you know, did any of, he never hit me and never, you know, did anything like that. Um, but he, you know, like when I would go to the doctor, he would come with me and then he would come into the appointment with me. And I just
Mm-hmm.
didn't even think anything of it, like that kind of monitoring, that kind
Mm-hmm.
of, you know, closeness, that kind of like, oh well, of course I'm just going to go into your appointment with you and talk to your doctor on your behalf about your body, which I know better than you do.
Yeah.
Very like, you know, just assuming himself the authority on all things. And like I remember this one appointment, my doctor asked him to leave the room, and because my doctor at the time was a guy, he complied. And my
Mm-hmm.
doctor like just very quietly, and generally I don't like to be treated by men, like male doctors, but I was in this case, and he just very quietly asked me like if I felt safe at home. And I remember it so clearly because, as I also talk about in the book, like I grew up in a home with like very violent domestic abuse, like witnessing that with between my parents. And so I knew exactly what he was asking, like, but I had never thought to consider that in my own relationships, because
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, my husband is so loving. My husband, he cares so much. He comes with me to a doctor's appointment. Like my dad would never have gone to a doctor's appointment. Like it's, you know, that kind of thing. But it's that kind of really, again, I'm overusing the word insidious right now, but like it's that kind of like
Mhm.
really pervasive control in all aspects of life, and really assuming that you can't, like, as a woman, as a wife, that you can't do anything on your own, and
Mhm.
that you like must inherently like require their permission, you must require their presence to make any kind of decision about your body. um that is abusive. That is like,
Yeah.
that is abuse. It does not have to be, it does not have to look like, and I think, and I do talk about this in the book a bit, like in some ways, again, like it's awful, there's so many folks who grew up with domestic abuse and domestic violence, but like I think sometimes the difficult thing about growing, one of the many difficult things about growing up with that situation, if it is a violent one, is that we can be so those of us who like survive that, is that we can be so attuned to looking for indicators that, like, oh well, it's not like my mom and dad, oh well, like I'm not getting thrown down a flight of stairs, oh I'm not getting hit, you know, like, oh he doesn't do any of those things, he's so attentive, he's so kind, or she's so attentive, she's so kind, you know. Again, like DV happens in queer like relationships too, so you know, same kind of thing. But like we can be so attuned to that that we miss the emotional and like mental um pieces sometimes, and the hey Kendra, hey babe, that we can miss the boundary violations, and we
Mhm.
can miss the emotional manipulation, and we can miss that kind of denial of our own authority, and that
Mhm.
denial of our personhood that really is foundational to all abuse. And so I've rambled there a fair bit, but like, yeah, it's really messed up.
No, it's
So
very
yeah,
eloquent ramble. Like it is, you weren't
yeah,
rambling. It's true. Like I think for me, coming to understand abuse, I has been learning that abuse is, I think Robert commented, boundary violations. It's like having,
yeah,
it's having no, it's losing control, it's losing agency,
yeah,
it's trying to draw a line around yourself and having that line constantly pushed. And like
yes,
something that really resonated from your book and that I picked up on is the idea that if you are raised within this faith and this is what's
mm-hmm.
modeled as ideal marriage, ideal womanhood, it's really having no boundaries and having no ownership
Mm,
and having no
yes.
agency. And so if someone is not physically violent and they are hyper controlling, that seems like
Mm-hmm.
a great husband in this framework. But
The bar
that's,
is
yeah.
like in the basement. It's in it's so low. Like,
Yes. Yes.
but that's so, like, the way you put that though, that's so, is so chilling. Like that, the idea that having no, yeah, that like within a faith, the pinnacle of faith as a woman is
Mm-hmm.
having no authority, and having, and like being entirely submissive. It's so
Mm-hmm.
chilling. It's so chilling, because
Yes.
even though in theory everyone is submitting to Jesus, like men are still, they still have that tempered, because they are still going to assume some kind of control, like over the, you know, whether it's because they're going to assume some kind of spiritual control, like they'll become pastors, or they'll at least become, you know, like husbands or fathers, or you know, they're going to acquire some kind of headship in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, again, I hate to be using gender in such a binary fashion right
Mm-hmm.
now, but again, in evangelicalism also, like
Yeah.
LGBT people like straight up don't exist, like, because
Yeah.
again, this model is so heteronormative, it's so like, you know, God put you on earth to like go forth and multiply, like there is no space for gender expansiveness, let alone queer people, like
Yeah.
um or frankly, like there's so much shit that single people even in the church get,
Mm-hmm.
like barring queerness, like single people, single parents, like
Yeah.
there is such an emphasis, like even the way I was talking about this with a friend, like the way that churches are organized, and the way that like extracurricular activities in churches are organized, it's so around like couples. And it's like as adults you have the couples Bible studies and the singles Bible studies,
Hmm.
and it's really like the point is entirely to put you into a couple that will have
Yeah.
children, and like it's really like not great.
Yeah, it's that
So
family unit.
yeah,
That is what you have to be doing, and you are either
yeah,
on your way to becoming part of that family unit or you don't belong in this
yeah.
space.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
compulsory heterosexuality to the
yes,
extreme.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then these are again like this is the the faith that's essentially the chosen faith of the Republican Party, and the
Mhm.
chose and then so that then when we have all these laws coming out, like it's not none of this is surprising,
Yeah.
like none of it, and which is also partly then where I get like I don't know the evangelicals who have hung on and who are like, oh well, like I don't understand where the Trump association came from. It's like this is the logical conclusion of
Yeah.
evangelical faith teaching methodology and like co-creation of policy with Republicans since the 1970s. Like I don't know, like you've had your head in the sand because this has been happening very solidly for the last 50 plus years, and you can trace it back, as I do in the book, like really to the founding of the country. So it's not like it's not new by
It's
any
not that
stretch.
surprising. I think like Trump himself being a figurehead for it is surprising for people because he is so amoral. But like this
Right.
is the trajectory that the Republican Party has been on. He just happened to be like the weirdo at the wheel right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think too, like him being him, and we don't have to talk about him a ton if we don't, because I know he's like not, I'm just like, oh, he's so just gross to even talk
He's
about.
still with us.
He is tragically still with us, like
Mhm.
just oh, RIP everything. But um like yeah, I don't know. He on the one hand, like yes, I think you're like the point you make, like he's so like profoundly clearly not a Christian. Like watching faith leaders try to bend like just really break themselves in half to try to
So
explain
bizarre.
how he is in any way a person of faith was hilarious and also really indicative of how like morally bankrupt a lot of
Mm.
these institutions are at this point. I'm like they're and again like to the point that they're really committed to power over all else.
Mhm.
It's really it was really, I mean, it was a lot of things before it was sad, but it was also sad because it's like these are pastors like I grew up watching, and
Yeah.
like their books were on my mom's bookshelf, and now they're out here like like stumping for Trump, and it was just like, are you fucking kidding me? Like this man. But but they care more about getting their Supreme Court judges, which they got,
Exactly. Exactly.
than anything else. And so that happened.
Everything went according to plan,
Everything
unfortunately.
went according to plan, and the fact that it has gone according to plan they see as God's will.
Mhm.
So which is a real like God's will is that concept is such a like I don't know, I think there's a lot of there it's not talked about a lot in the media, but when I hear there's a lot of politicians speak, especially from Republicans, that like it's so coded,
Mm.
like, and the way that like it's still so common to pray on the floor of the House or the Senate.
Yeah.
Like after everything happened like with January 6th, I remember and watching like all of these different politicians take the floor, and they were like quoting Bible verses, and they were like Nancy Pelosi led a house prayer, and I'm like, that's like a Democrat from San Francisco,
California.
from the
Yeah.
Bay. That's a Democrat House leader
Yeah.
like from the Bay leading a house prayer to a Christian God. Like if anyone doubts that like the absolute stranglehold that Christianity has on like on our politics. I don't know. It was just a really I remember just watching the feed, and it was a really staggering like thing to witness. Sorry, I've gone a little bit off, but yeah.
No, I mean, absolutely. I think like I grew up kind of hyper aware of moments where there wasn't a clear separation between church and state, especially in like public school. Like that was something because I was like a weirdo, strident atheist child. I like picked up on a
Mm-hmm.
lot of that stuff. And
Yeah.
like it's still so it just leaps out those moments where
Yeah.
we are not we talk about having so much separation. It just doesn't really exist and it
Yeah.
hasn't ever existed. And
Yeah.
it's worth flagging
Yeah.
for the people at home.
How has this year like felt for you with everything with Roe and Dobbs and like I mean, what, like, I mean, I know how I feel like with my background and like kind of this always being end game, but
Mhm.
like, how has it felt for you witnessing this? Like,
I mean, it's like it was shocking I think probably more shocking for me than it was for
Mm-hmm.
you, because I grew up in, especially since I've always lived in like a very liberal state. Like
Mm-hmm.
Connecticut has so many protections for abortion access that
Got
I've
it.
always been so removed from the reality of it not being available to me, that I think it was
Mm-hmm.
just one of those moments where it's like, oh, we live in a very different world, and clearly we've lived here for a while and I didn't
Yeah.
notice. But I also feel like nothing has
Yeah.
surprised me since the Trump election. Like I've
Right.
kind of just been like, anything can happen. And
Yeah.
I've volunteered with Planned Parenthood on and off over the years.
Oh,
So like,
yeah.
yeah, like when I was 18, I worked at the local clinic on procedure day. So like I've walked past the
Wow.
protesters. Like it's been more of a real life thing than like a phenomenon that I read about, the anti-choice movement in this country. But it has been fascinating to see, like, in my community that I live in Connecticut, people are fucking shocked. Like people are
Wow.
shocked,
Yeah.
and they shouldn't be. I'm like, where have you been? Have you what? Where have you been?
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
is, my hometown where I live right now is like, it's very very Republican and
Mm-hmm.
very affluent.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's interesting seeing Republican women kind of not know what to do in this moment, because I don't know that they are super religious, but
Mm-hmm.
and wealthy women, especially wealthy white women, will always have access to abortion
We'll
care. So
always
it's
have
like,
it.
yeah, but
Yeah.
I'm seeing a lot more like local politicians who are Republican in Greenwich, like don't know what to say. They like don't know what stance they should even take, because they're
Wow.
so aware of how politics has become national and they want to make sure they're towing the party line. But it's a lot
Mm-hmm.
harder to know what Connecticut voters, it's really weird. It's like every few weeks Republicans locally are kind of saying a different thing about abortion access. And
That's
so
so
it's
interesting.
bizarre. And like I could talk about my local
Yeah.
politics here for a long time, but it's been very strange. But
Yeah.
yeah, not great. Not a great time.
No, it's no, that's so interesting though, because like
Mhm,
I mean, again, like I grew up, in a very Republican
mhm,
household, like very, again, like my mom's super evangelical, my dad, like, again, casually,
mhm,
like, like not super religious. He didn't really have that conversion experience until I was in high school, but he was still a very devout conservative, like
mhm,
Republican. So I remember always being aware of kind of the different shades of Republican.
mhm,
But one thing that we definitely like didn't have in our circle was kind of that version, like the wealthy white, like
mhm.
business
It's a
Republicans,
lot of like the
you
Bush
know? The
Republicans
Bush
here.
Republicans. Yeah, exactly. No, like those were a version that I didn't really grow up around. And
Mhm,
so that was always really interesting to me, like what they do with the absolute, like, virulent, like social, like, religious shit that
mhm.
so much of the rest of the party has really like driven it toward, which is of course just like undergirded by absolutely wild white supremacy. Like,
Yes. Yeah.
so that's really fascinating to me, like how all of those
Mhm.
have like managed to hang together
Yeah. It's
throughout.
tenuous at times, but it is
It's
like
very
there's the larger
tenuous.
commitment to existing power structures and white power
Yeah,
structures. And like,
yeah,
I was so fascinated in your book when you talked about moving to Boston and like all these
yeah.
really evangelical roots in Boston. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that we think of New England as being so liberal and progressive, but it's at
It's
the same
not.
time, there's this deep Protestant, like very conservative, very Christian identity here too. It just looks a little
Mm-hmm.
different. It's like a different flavor.
It's a
And
different
so, yeah.
flavor. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you, but
Yeah, no, I wasn't really going anywhere with that. I was just like, that stood out to me in your book too, because it's like,
yeah,
we're not exempt. It's here too. It just looks slightly
yeah,
different. And there's a lot of condescension in New England for the Midwest and for
yeah,
the South and for these like hyper religious evangelical spaces. It's like, they're here too. Like, we're
yeah.
all,
It
yeah, it's no better here. It's just slightly different.
it was interesting though, because when I lived in Boston, it took me a really long time to I like living there was really really helpful. Even, I mean, for many reasons, obviously, like came
Yeah.
out, all the other stuff, got divorced, blah blah. But like it really was helpful because it really forced me to untangle like because initially I remember when I moved there and just the culture shock was wild, even though like
Mhm.
my grandparents actually are from, my mom's folks are from Boston. So like that was like, I thought everyone's parents, like grandparents talked with a Boston accent. I just thought that's like my grandpa was like from Southie, like like an Irish Catholic boy from Southie. I just thought that that's like how people spoke. And like when you got old, you just sounded like you had, like you know, dropped the R's and whatever. Um, but yeah, I really it took me a long time to untangle like my what of my discomfort was the like Boston vis-a-vis, and just like being in grad school out there vis-a-vis the Midwest,
Mhm.
vis-a-vis the fact that I had grown up working class, where so many of the people
Mhm.
in my PhD program were like very much like middle class to upper middle class to, you know, most folks were not like from families like mine, versus what of it was just a country versus like yeah, urban divide.
Mhm.
Like, because there are plenty, which I think I forget so often about New England, having only lived in the Boston metro, and which my very dear friends who are from New England remind me, most of New England is profoundly rural,
Yeah.
like very rural. So I made some really dear friends out there who, like, one of her, you know, one of my best friend's dads is like a fisherman. Like, I was like, people are still fishermen? Yeah,
Mhm.
in Maine there's still fishermen, like working class fishermen, you know, like blue collar, like up at north in Maine. And like that, like it was so interesting because we had so much more in common than some of the other folks in my grad program who were also from the Midwest, but whose parents like were much better off than mine. It was a
Mhm.
very interesting and like slow process of untangling all of that for me. Um, but also the other thing is like that when working on the book and writing about like the profound and deep puritanical roots of Boston and New England generally, it was kind of helpful because I was like, okay, we have this perception of like New England being so liberal now and
Mhm.
like so removed from its puritanical past. Like maybe that's where the rest of the country is going. Like the rest of the country is just, and I think it's so easy to forget this, it's like a lot newer. Like,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah,
the
that's true.
Midwest, like the Midwest was settled like, you know, not heavily settled until the mid 1800s, like the West, like in the
Yeah.
Southwest, like, you know, I mean, certain parts of New Mexico and Florida, of course, are in, like just as old as like Massachusetts. But, and it was like Mexico then, like, you know, but like,
Yeah.
because colonialism is wild. But like, I don't know. I was thinking about that and just being like, well, maybe like this is just our really zealous phase in our Pluto return, and we just, not to bring astrology into it, and we just have to like calm the fuck down, like just like spend the next
Mhm.
few years like, and we'll get to the point where New England is like, yeah, you can go to church if you want, it's fine, like we don't
Mhm.
care, like we'll just gradually like chill out. That's my
Mhm.
hope. I don't think it's gonna happen, but it's my dearest hope.
We'll
Like,
see. I mean, it's so funny, like what you were saying about how a lot of New England is rural. Like, I
mm-hmm.
don't think people realize Connecticut is slowly tilting purpley. Like it's a blue state, but like there I
It's
remember I went to college in the middle of the state in Middletown,
mm,
and like
mm,
I remember visiting friends who were a few years below me around the 2016 election, and like Trump did a rally in Hartford, like, and people from
yeah,
more rural areas in Connecticut were really excited he was there. And like
yeah,
I don't think the state's going to tip blue anytime soon at a state level, but
but it's there.
there are pockets that are very conservative.
Yeah.
And Vermont is the same way. New Hampshire obviously is even more
Oh,
red. Like,
New Hampshire's
yeah,
Trump country. Like
exactly.
New Hampshire is straight up like you. When I was driving, one of my very dear friends got married in, not like, it was what, October 2016? Yeah,
Mm,
October 2016.
oof.
And when we were driving out to the wedding, it was like Trump sign, Trump sign, Trump sign, Trump sign. And it's
Hmm.
like, that's New Hampshire. Live free or
Yeah,
die, baby. And it's like they are conservative as fuck up there.
yeah.
And
And
I know
still
that
very
it,
religious. And it's like,
mm-hmm,
it's much more, like, church attendance varies up here, but
mm-hmm.
it's still deeply, deeply, deeply ingrained.
Yeah, yeah. It's so interesting too, because like my ex-husband and I were a part of a church plant in Boston, and they were people who were from, I think they were from Virginia. They were from like
Hmm.
some part of like around the Mason-Dixon line, like upper, like I don't know what you call the like very upper. It's not the deep South, but it's
Hmm.
like, you know. But they were like, yes, New England, it's so heathen, it's so atheist, like, because it's like the darkness of New
Yeah.
England. It's like technically it's the least churched
Mm.
population in like region in the United States, technically. But as you're saying, it actually goes very deep.
Mhm.
And like there is still plenty of attendance and like
So funny.
folks. Right? It is very funny, which I mean, obviously, like if you're comparing anything to Southern Baptists in the South or like all the Lutherans out in the Midwest, then yeah,
Mhm.
anybody's gonna seem less religious than that. But like,
It's
it,
so relative. Like,
yeah,
I remember growing up here balking at how religious I felt like Connecticut was, but in when I go
wow,
south and when I visit family, like my ex had family in the south and we would drive down and it was like, "Oh no, this is real religious." Like it's so relative.
yeah,
And like I went to church with my partner once in or my ex once in California. Like it's and that was in the Bay Area. And so like faith is everywhere, and so much of our cultural identity in the US is
yeah,
baked into Christianity that like it doesn't really matter where you are if the federal law is encoded with all these Christian
right,
values. Like,
yeah,
oh, it's crazy.
yeah.
It's wild.
I no, I will say too. I don't think that there's I don't think it's an accident that this country is both so religious and also that we are like the most warlike, war-mongering
Mm.
nation in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Because like the American version of Christianity it's not about like gentle Jesus. It's not
Mm-hmm.
about like, which I have a lot of thoughts about, like cool Jesus. Like when you see those Twitter posts going around every once in a while that are like, Jesus was a brown Palestinian Jew who was the son of refugees,
And
and he
who
was
loves
friends with
sex workers? Yeah.
if they changed. That was the key thing. It's actually if
Mm.
they changed, he loves sex. Nobody likes to think about that last part, but like it's like yes, all of that is extremely true, and like he lived in a like Jerusalem that was under Roman occupation, and also like
Mm-hmm.
he's if the texts are to be believed, he said a lot of shitty things.
Yeah.
Who fucking knows? Anyway, point being, whatever version he has now been made into, like the white Jesus version of the white church, is like all about the language is that of war. The language is that of now we have victory in Christ, and like we are like victorious through the blood of the lamb, and the lamb is one of Jesus's, it's like a metaphor for Jesus, it's one of his names. And so it's all of this you know like very just battle hardy, like you are
Mm.
Christ's soldiers. Like the American Jesus is very, very militant.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's accidental, that consequently this is a very like, we've become a very colonial state power that is very like insistent on enforcing American values, quote unquote,
Yeah.
on the rest of the world. It like on the one hand, Christianity is a very useful religion for colonial states, because of the so-called Great Commission in the Gospels, where Jesus tells his followers to go and like spread the word, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So like that's just like a convenient like religious, justification. Like I don't know what the term would be, but like it's like a I don't know, it's a false like like shield like over whatever
Mm-hmm.
someone's true motivations are. But also like it's become very militant, and
Mm-hmm.
so anyway, not that Christianity historically is any less militant. Like look at the Crusades, look at look at so much. But I think there's a lot to be said for that. And
Yeah.
there's just not a lot of accountability in the church for that, because there
Mm-hmm.
is this really useful language around the quote unquote separation of church and state, which is not real.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's actually not a thing. Um,
No, it's really not.
but
That's fascinating. Yeah.
yeah.
I've been listening to the QAnon Anonymous podcast, and I don't think I realized how much. Yeah, we don't have to go fully deep into that, but like,
You were
it's so
braver than I.
interesting. I really like the podcast because they do like break down that it's kind of like they're almost interpreting the weirdness of it, but I didn't fully understand how much like evangelical Christianity has become like a lot of QAnon
Yeah.
is are evangelical Christians, and like
Yeah.
that's where a lot of that militaristic language is coming in of like we are warriors to help, like we are like
Yeah.
QAnon is a righteous battle, like
Yeah.
that's one of those moments where like a weird group of evangelicals are really showing they're crazy, but like
Mm-hmm.
it seems like after reading your book I was like that seems like one natural outcome of this whole worldview, and like this is a very specific weird niche one that intersected with the internet, but like
Yeah.
I could see the pattern. And you wrote in the
Yeah.
book about how like you everything that has happened makes sense when you are familiar with this
Mm-hmm.
evangelical upbringing and huge cultural force within the US, and like if you aren't fully aware of that, it's a lot more surprising that the political climate is what it is. Like I reading your book, I could see the path much more clearly of how that
Mm.
happened.
Yeah.
Um, which is one example, but that's like clear, like it's a lot, but it's really
It's a
useful. Yeah,
lot.
yeah.
And I'm glad because I will say like, and I think also like I see I don't know who it is in the chat saying this, but like oh my God, Onward Christian Soldiers, that fucking song. I remember that. Oh, but that's
Mm-hmm.
a really good example of like, because that's a children's song. Onward Christian
Uh,
Soldiers is yeah, exactly. And like they teach us that in like Bible, like in Sunday school, like when we're very little. I know. See, the reaction
yeah.
that you're having is like the reaction people should have. Because then I think about the adults who are teaching us this, and I'm like, wait,
Mm-hmm.
why are you, a 35-year-old woman, teaching 6-year-olds this song? This is such a weird thing. So thank you for bringing that up first, because that's like, whew, that just triggered a memory. But yeah, like the I don't know what you're saying, Ella. I just like so appreciate how open you've been to like talking with me about
Mm-hmm.
this,
Yeah.
and to just like the whole like just to being like, yeah, this is an influence that's present even if like I didn't grow up seeing it. Because I think I had one of the things with writing the book that I had to get over question mark
Mm-hmm.
was a lot of defensiveness, like
Mm-hmm.
toward, not even like toward, you know, the evangelical church, whatever. Like I grew up with that. I know
Yeah.
them. I know that game. But like was toward like, you know, folks like in academia, in like
Mm-hmm.
literary and media circles, like the folks out here who I've now lived around for so long and so much, who tend to have, or who in my experience have often historically had really like dismissive attitudes toward
Yeah. Deeply
even
condescending.
deeply
Yeah.
condescending. And like I get the comment. I was talking about this actually with Vanessa B, who is such a wonderful writer. Her book Homebound comes out next week. Everyone should get it. She also talks about being an ex-evangelical in it. But we were talking about this at a Brooklyn Book Fest event this last week, about how something both of us get all the time is people telling us, I can't believe you used to be religious. And they mean it
Uh,
as a compliment, and I understand the thinking, but it is so condescending, because it's like what they're saying, it's like, oh, you're a smart person, like you're
yeah.
accomplished, how could you possibly have fallen for that, blah blah, like, or whatnot. And it's like, religion is one of the most sustaining sources of human connection and community throughout history. Like
Mm-hmm.
religion itself isn't a problem. Like seeking connection with other people, seeking community with other people, seeking connection even like with the divine or with spirit
Yeah.
around you, like that is one of the most sustaining things that like history shows us people have always looked to. Like that's not I don't know. So this very like, to me, like I call it neoliberal. I don't know if that's even the best term for it, but like to me it's a very like neoliberal idea that like religion means you're less than, or that like
Yeah.
believing in religion
Mm-hmm.
means that you know, aren't as X, Y, or Z.
Mm-hmm.
Or this idea that like if you're educated, then you won't fall for any of that anymore, you know,
Well, it's
or
it's
that
the
you,
whole insult of religion being the opiate of the masses. Like it's so
right,
condescending. It's very it's condescending, it's ignorant, and it's funny, like I definitely was raised to be like kind of a snobby little asshole about religion, and I really did look down
yeah,
on people who were religious for a lot of my like childhood and teen years, and it was
mm-hmm.
something that I like have really worked to challenge myself on, because it's so
Mm-hmm.
it's coming from ignorance. Like, it's something that I'm just not familiar with. And so
Yeah.
much of what I think comes through in your book, and from getting closer to friends and loved ones who are more spiritual and members of the faith, like, the problem is usually the institution. It's not
Mm-hmm.
the faith. It's
Yeah.
not even necessarily the scripture. It's the people, and the way that people and power and institutions rot. And
Mm-hmm.
the way that religion in particular can be used to uphold these deeply sexist, racist, classist
Yeah.
worldviews. And religion can be like Christianity. You wrote about like how there probably isn't a way to take back and reclaim Christianity in this country, because
Yeah.
this is what it is today. But
Yeah.
I like, for me, like, when I hear people talking about people of faith like that, it reminds me so, and the idea of like, oh, I can't believe you're religious or you were raised this way. Like, what I hear is kind of like, I can't believe you dated an abuser, or I can't believe you were in this situation. Like, I
Yeah.
thought you were smarter than this. Like, there's an
Right.
assumption there. And like, I've read a lot about cult stuff because I'm really fascinated by coercive control and how
Yeah.
control works. And a cult is just like a group abusive relationship in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And people talk about like how no one sets out to join a cult. They set out to join like a group that's going to help them reach their goals. And like,
Yeah.
no one falls in love with an abuser. They fall in love with someone who seems really wonderful. And like,
Mm-hmm.
no one joins an oppressive, awful religion. They're seeking community, they're seeking meaning, they're
Yeah.
seeking a framework. And
Yeah.
sometimes that local faith leader is a jerk. But like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm glad that I come across as curious, because like, I'm
You
so
too.
aware of my own blind spots. But
Yeah.
it's so, I grew up and surrounded by this, and I didn't fully understand it, and it made me really
Yeah.
vulnerable to dating someone who was a little awful, and used religion in that. But also, like, it makes me a better political citizen to understand this. It
Yeah.
makes me a better friend and a better writer. Like,
Mm.
I I'm trying, and I'm so excited to read your book. I'm like on a kick of reading books about faith and religion, and
Yeah.
particularly how they intersect with gender, because it's so,
Mm-hmm.
you can't separate those two things. You have to, it's all intertwined. That's my rant.
It really, no, it's such a good rant though. It really is. And I would read, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I'm so grateful to people like Garrett Conley, whose wonderful book, whose wonderful memoir, Boy Erased, like, I think opened the doors for so many books like mine to be in the world. It's a really excellent memoir, detailing his time in conversion therapy. He's the son of a Baptist minister. So, you know, that's like,
Woof.
a whole situation. But like, because there aren't a lot of books like this out there, right? Like, publishing tends to be more interested in the hillbilly elegies
Yeah,
and
it's
in
very
the,
othering. Yeah,
it's very othering. And it tends to, it kind of in the way that the New York Times, not to dunk on them, but they are the paper of record.
we can
You know,
dunk
they
on
set
them.
them, they can afford for us to dunk on
They can take it.
them. They can, but like, in that way that, you know, they're much more interested in talking about the white working class and like, why didn't Democrats win them in whatever election, than in, I don't know, like, systemic abuse that's happening with the NYPD in our own, in the cities. Like, I live in Brooklyn, so like, in the city's own backyard, like in Black and brown neighborhoods. Like, we could do that, or we could profile like one Trump voter in Ohio. And listen, Ohio is a wonderful state. I'm from the Midwest. I will defend Ohio forever. But also, like, what we don't need to be doing is like profiling people who are already members of the majority, and who
Mm-hmm.
are already like part of the, like, who are already part of the groups that people in power and systems in power are working to protect so actively. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and that's, to my mind, and like, why I say in the last chapter, I was like, am I going to say this? Sure, let's go, fuck it. I was like, yeah, the evangelical church is busted, like, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't think there's any redeeming it. um I'm so sorry, I don't know what Ohio did to you, but I'm so sorry about that. But like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like, I don't think that evangelicalism, at least, can be like, I don't think there's any redeeming it in this country. Like, it's rotten. It's
Yeah.
like, just from the top down, it's completely infected, like, our pop culture and our government and our politicians, and like, every, like, even voting, like, I mean, I will continue to vote Democrat knowing that that alone is not enough. Like, it's it's going to take a really long time to, you know, bleach, disinfect this like from the inside out. If that's possible, question mark, who knows?
We'll
Like,
see. Yeah.
we'll see.
I am definitely not a solutions person. I really enjoy being the person who's like, let's look under this rug and see what's fucked up over here today.
Yeah.
Like I know I'm not the person who's
Same.
gonna fix it.
No, no, again, we are writers. We are not, we
Yeah.
ourselves are not like political consultants. We are actively, who actually themselves probably aren't the people who are going to fix it
Yeah.
either. Like, let's be real. It's like activists on the ground, and like they're the ones who
Yeah.
are going to be fixing it. But we are keeping, the record of what's happening. That's,
Hmm.
I don't know. I think a lot about what Toni Morrison said, about like working as an editor at Random, when she was working as an editor at Random House, like in the late 70s and early 80s, like during, you know, during like the peak of like civil rights and like women's rights movements in the late 70s, and like during the rise of the Black Panthers, and then during, of course, like the really horrific like racist conservative backlash. She talked about how the people on the streets like couldn't stay in the streets forever, and how there would need to be a record of
Hmm.
what happened, and there would need to be a record of like who was out there, and there would need to be documentation, there would need to be that legacy, and that her job was to keep the legacy, and which she did. And I don't know, I think about that a lot, like as a writer, and I imagine you do too, like that our job is to like record what's happening and to connect the dots for people who are too fucking overworked and stressed
Hmm.
to be like casually doing this in their downtime. So like, I wrote about the history of religion in this country, so everyone else doesn't have to. Like,
Yeah, and something I think you
yeah,
did really well was connecting the macro to the micro. Like
yeah,
you are recording history and recording what's going on, but you also might reach a reader who right now is in
yeah,
a really troubling relationship or struggling with their faith, and
yeah.
that's like having those personal stories with the political layer. You're able to connect
Mm,
the dots for folks who might just be exhausted from work and not be able to see like, oh, my family dynamic and the things that are not working attached to this larger
yeah,
legacy and this larger pattern, and I'm not crazy because this is where all this has come from. Like
yeah.
it's super worth doing. I think you did a very good job. I also know that
Thank
I've kept
you.
you for an hour, so if you have to go, I can let you go. I could talk to you forever, but
Yeah, no,
I love your book so much.
thank you so much, Ella. I like so beyond appreciate it, and I'm so glad that we could do this. Like, you're the
Yeah.
best, and like this has just been so good and so heartwarming. And like, thanks to everyone who stuck with us too on like a Tuesday night, just hanging.
Yeah, we
Like,
had people popping in and out. I'm curious to
yeah,
see how many total we had, but
yeah,
is there anything that you would like? Obviously, people should go order the book. But
that
is
would be
there anything
lovely.
else
Yes.
that you'd like to plug or anything else that you'd like to say? I don't know if
Yeah.
I'm like early in your press tour,
You're,
so to
oh, this
speak,
is,
but
no, this is early. This is early.
mhm,
This week things start to hit, and I'm like
mhm,
a little, you know, whatever. But but yeah, no. So this is good. But yeah,
mhm.
no, pre-orders are amazing. Also, if you're in, I'm going to be doing a number of events in New York and Boston and virtually, and also I'm officially coming to Iowa in January, which I am
Cute.
so excited about, to be going back home to do some stuff with my undergrad and with Prairie Lights. But yeah, so New
Prairie
York,
lights, yay.
yeah. It's like I've been going to Prairie Lights since I was a baby, like,
Mhm.
so it's like it's
This is the
very
dream
much,
book event. That's so cool.
yeah, it's really a homecoming. But yeah, my book launch is at Books Are Magic on October 25th, and I've got all the events on my website. But Boston, I'll be there November 3rd, technically in Cambridge, if you're in the Boston area, and other events are to come. But I am really
Yay.
excited to be getting to do some light travel, some
That's
light,
perfect.
careful travel. So
Yes. Yay.
yeah.
Yeah. Everybody, the book is Heretic. It is excellent. I have a paperback early copy, but it looks like it's a
Yes.
beautiful hardcover.
It is. It's a pretty like soft touch. It's a very velvety, like
Ooh.
powdery. It's very nice. Also, like there are a number of folks getting copies early because Bookshop it's not out yet technically. October 25th is the release, but if you pre-ordered through Bookshop, one of their facilities, in a very Mercury retrograde move, had the wrong pub date in their computer, and so sent out a fuck ton of copies. So
That's
like
hilarious.
a lot of them have been released to the world,
Oh man.
which is lovely. Honestly, it's like people will read it when they have the time and like when
And
it's
hopefully
right.
those
So
are like very excited, enthusiastic, supportive
yeah,
readers since they pre-ordered and from Bookshop no less. So like hopefully it's just like
exactly.
nice people pumping you with good vibes
Oh
as the
my
release comes
God.
up.
No, I've been getting like so many texts from friends like with their copies and like with their copies and
Yay.
their dogs. My partner's ex-husband like sent me a picture of his copy with it like with their dog. It's like it's the fucking sweetest thing.
Perfect ex-husband
So
behavior.
my partner has like perfect like like ex-husband behavior. Like yes. So very, very good. It's like really lovely support. So
Mhm.
yeah, pre-orders, events, telling your friends, all the good stuff. I will say also, not just me, but like if you have other if folks who are watching have other like LGBT and BIPOC authors who have books coming out, especially debuts, like debut
Mhm.
novels, debut essay collections, memoirs, like pre-orders are so, so important right now. The industry is really cracking down in a conservative way, like following all of these like book bans and like other bullshit. And like I don't know, I'm just hearing from one too many friends like
Mhm.
who are out on submission that they like have, it's like they're getting told by editors that it's like, oh, we have like our one gay book for the season, like that kind of bullshit. So like pre-orders are how we show publishers that there are audiences for these books. So like again, not like obviously mine hugely appreciated, but just like generally for authors from underrepresented like communities, it truly makes an enormous difference. So
Yeah,
yeah,
take out
that's
your
my that's
wallet if you can.
yeah,
Yeah, request from your local library as well. Let
yes,
librarians know what you're looking for. Like
yes,
if a bunch of books aren't in your budget, there are other ways to show your support for authors, debut authors, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, I love throwing my money at authors. So
me
I'm
too.
like, absolutely. But yes,
Yeah,
go buy Heretic, go pre-order it. It is phenomenal. It is mildly triggering, but I appreciated that you have a content warning in the front too. I was like,
I
I feel
do. Yes,
supported. I feel safe reading this book.
yeah,
But
yeah.
thank you so much for coming to hang out with me on
Thank
Instagram
you so
Live.
much. Thank you for
Yay.
having me and have a wonderful rest of your night, everybody.
Yay. Bye, everyone.
All
Bye,
right.
friend.
Bye.